I've been doing automation for a really long time, so I take things for granted sometimes. Like to me, it's like well, yeah. But for you, it might not be very straightforward. So I think today, let's kind of talk a little bit about why we write automation. Like why? Because I mean, if you think about it, login, right? It took us a lot longer to automate login than it would have taken us to just log in. You guys agree? Yeah. Right? So why? Why pay somebody a lot more money, first of all, to write automation? And why, invest so much time into automation, right? Like, so what's the benefit? So if you start looking at all the, bullet points, benefits of automation, one of the things that always comes up is price, right? They always say that automation cuts costs. But that's not very straightforward as far as I'm concerned, because if I'm gonna pay, it's called a software developer in test, okay? So if you're writing automation, you're a software developer in test, right? So you're gonna pay a software developer in test a lot more money than you're gonna pay a regular, quality engineer, right? It's just, that's how it is. So how can it lead to cost savings, right? How can it lead to cost savings when you're paying more for essentially the same test, right? So what do you think?
In the long run.
Huh?
In the long run, it will.
Regression.
My thought is that when we do automation, so we pay more, but by doing that, we eliminate the number of mistakes, the human factor.
Okay.
Regression will be easy, so you don't need multiple people doing the manual testing again and again.
Everything because of time now.
Okay, all right, so I'm hearing lots of different things here, and I think all of them are correct. So that leads me to my next question. So that means, should we automate everything? Or are there some things that we really shouldn't automate? Are there situations where we should not automate?
Some things could not be automated.
Well, let's not even worry about some things that cannot be automated. We'll come back to that. Just in general, let's say it can be automated. Should it be? Yeah.
I don't think you should always determine the trade-off between, again, paying the engineer and what you're testing. So I think, from what I recall, you can test things that are, I wouldn't say monotonous, but more, it's kind of repeating processes maybe, and you would do manual testing on things that are kind of one-off situations where you're really trying to push through the system maybe.
Okay, right, exactly. So, one of the thoughts that was mentioned is that over time, right, we will see the benefit, right? So at first the investment is greater, but over time we see the benefit. And one of the reasons we see a benefit over time is because mistakes that humans tend to make, just because when they're doing something repetitive, right, if you write code, will not happen, right? Because as humans, we tend to take shortcuts, right? Like if we've done something long enough, repetitively, we learn how to cut some corners, right? We're like, well, it's a little faster if I do it this way. But what we want is to have all those same steps repeatable every single time, right? Without those little corners cut. So over time, yes, it goes to savings. But my question is, do we automate everything, right? And there are situations. So can you think of in which situations would you not automate?
When the product is not stable.
When the product is not stable, okay.
Evolving. GUI change.
When UI changes, right? Well, yes and no, right? So depends on how much it will change. So if it's just the colors will change and maybe the positions of buttons will change, as long as those buttons have unique identifiers, such as IDs, you can technically move that button anywhere, right? Because it has an ID, it will still be found on the page. Now, if that button is completely going to disappear off the page, then, obviously, yes, then it's too much for our code to handle. All right, any other situations? Well, load testing, yeah, you can actually automate load testing, but not with Webdriver, for sure. That would be bad. Do you guys know why it would be bad to automate load testing with Webdriver?
Because we want to use, we like want to use it.
It's just very expensive. Yeah, so you guys understand the concept of load testing, right?
You mean using the Webdriver, not other tools.
Yeah, yes. That's what I said, with Webdriver.
It's not threading,
With
it's
Webdriver.
not- yeah.
So what's load testing? I know we're skipping back and forth, but what's load testing? How's that different than usability testing or regular UI regression testing.
So just
Lot
create a
of-
certain
lot of
level
users.
of,
How many
uh,
users are hitting at the same time?
Not even how many, I mean,
What kind
Capabilities
of,
the system.
How it handles all of this.
there's lots of things we can do, but essentially what we're doing is we're simulating more than one concurrent user, right?
Yeah.
In fact, more than 10 concurrent users. And most websites these days are designed for hundreds, right? So hundreds should be able to use this application simultaneously. Now, we talked last week about what will happen if we open up a whole bunch of windows and don't close them, right? But that's just opening up windows and not closing them. Now, can you imagine opening up that many windows on one computer and actually using them simultaneously?
not really.
All right, so your computer can only handle so much. I mean, now we have pretty strong computers. 10 years ago, it would have probably been like 5, right? And it would have crashed. Now I'm pretty sure your computer could probably handle 10 or 15 sessions simultaneously. But still, in order to reach the magnitude of where it actually becomes a load test that's significant enough to load the system, right? You would need to have what? 10, 20, 30 machines, right? So using Webdriver is just not a very cost-effective way to do it, especially if you're testing some kind of very, very large e-commerce site, Amazon, right? That's designed to handle millions. So how many computers would you need if you're running 10, 15 sessions on each computer, right? Not cost-effective. So there's other tools, and there's lots of other tools, right? There's well, JMeter is my favorite, but there's a whole bunch of other ones. There's Grinder, which is actually becoming deprecated. There is really blanking out right now, you guys. Anyways, not the point. If you Google load testing software, you'll find plenty. Back to the original point. So there are situations when you don't automate, when something is very short-lived, right? When something is very short-lived, you don't want to automate it. Because again, the effects are only seen over time. Now, if you're not sure how, if you're not sure whether you should automate because something is short-lived, another thing you should consider is how much change is going to be happening to that short-lived thing over like period of time, because really, then like it's basically cost versus how many times you have to do regression. Right? So if you have 10 people working on this thing all the time and putting in additional changes, and every time they put a change you have to do regression, maybe it's still worth it to automate, right? At least some basic functionality, at least a smoke test. Okay, so we talked about why we automate, we talked about some of the benefits over time, but how does it actually work, right? How do you get to those benefits? So you wrote a script, there it is. It's sitting on your laptop/desktop, right? And what? I mean, it's right there. I don't feel like it's doing much good, right? It's sitting there. So how do you actually make it work for you? How do you get those benefits?
You have to
You run it on,
You run it.
environment.
Who runs it? You run it?
no, we.
So
So do you
automate it.
actually like come to work and you say, run as,
No,
go.
you automate it.
All right, so there's a second layer of automation, right? What is that second layer of automation called?
Jenkins.
Jenkins.
CI. And CI stands for
Continuous integration.
continuous integration. And can we name some CIs that are out there?
Jenkins.
Jenkins, what else? There's more than Jenkins.
TeamCity.
Okay, what else?
Um,
Bamboo, what else?
Something.
There's Circle CI, there's Hudson, that's kind of more legacy and it's a paid for software. What else? Actually, Microsoft Visual Studio has their own, I forgot what it's called. Azure, it's the Azure Suite, but there's actual like a separate name for the CI itself. I'm blanking out right now on, but you see what I mean. There's many different softwares out there that would fall under CI category. What is this CI, magical CI? The best way to explain to you guys how it works is to show you my alarm on my phone. All right, this is my alarm. All right, do you see how I have multiples? Right, multiples? Okay, so essentially this is how any CI works. You create a separate job, so these are all jobs, right? And you configure them how you want them to run. For example, my first alarm, right, runs every single day in the middle of the night, right? I have my crazy reasons, don't worry about it, all right? All right, then my second alarm only runs on work days. Then my third alarm maybe runs only on Tuesday, right, of every single week. And then my fourth alarm maybe runs every other day. you can configure CI to do exactly the same thing. So essentially, you can have it, for example, in the middle of the night from 9 p.m. onwards to run your entire regression suite, right? Assuming you work for a large company, your regression suite might be actually pretty lengthy, right? It might take a few hours to run. And so during the day when developers are making very small changes, right, they might not want to wait for 2-3 hours every single time, right? They make a change. So you might configure it so that you have smart CI that looks into which folder they committed and then runs only a certain suite, right? Kind of a smaller one. Something like an acceptance or smoke or some kind of functional bit of the entire regression suite. Does that make sense?
Okay.
All right? And then during the night, without anybody doing anything, just at 9 p.m., the whole shebang runs, right? All right, so that's one way you can do it. You can actually configure it like an alarm, all right? There's another thing you can do on your phones. It's a kind of like a event-based alarm. Have you guys used those? Event-based?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
I'm sure you have,
Alert.
right? When I get home, well, this is kind of the same thing with CI. You can do event-based jobs, all right? And instead of going, they again kick off your script. What's some of the events that can trigger it? Well, let's say that a developer, so he creates some new code, right? And he pushes that code into the remote repository, right? So there's a remote repository where all the golden code is, and he pushes his new code in. So he creates a separate little copy of the golden branch and also puts that into remote. Well, as soon as that happens, your repository can actually let Jenkins know, or let your CI know, let your Bamboo, it doesn't have to be Jenkins, let your CI know that, oh, I have new stuff. And so instead of that developer going, hey, QE, I need you to test this stuff, he actually doesn't have to do anything, all right? That event by itself, just him going push, will trigger the entire CI to pull all his code, recompile it, build the application, deploy the application, right? And then run your tests against that application. And if your tests all pass, then everything is good and the developer is happy and you're happy and everyone's, in a good mood. Now, if something bad happens, right, then it will send an email to the developer and say, I'm sorry. And until the developer fixes whatever is broken, the developer won't be able to put his changes into the golden code branch. Right? So there's a golden branch that should be always working, and then there's his branch that he created. Well, until everything is working and everyone's happy, that code can't go in. It's a gate. Can't go in. All right? Make sense? All right. So let's say another scenario. Let's say the developer ran through all this golden stuff. Right? It was good. It was fine. And so he was like, I feel pretty good about this. I'd like to take my separate copy of the golden branch, right, with my changes, and merge it now into the golden branch, right? I want to merge it in. So now the previously non-broken golden branch is going to get some additional changes that are already tested by your code. You might be asleep. You might not even know he's doing any of this stuff. You wrote your tests, you went home, and now he can do changes as often as he wants. Nobody cares, right? So he puts the code in, and he thinks it's already tested. Seems like it's all good, right? But then at 9 p.m., your regression suite kicks in, right? That 3-hour one, the very big one, right? And all of a sudden, things break. Well, now, because he broke the golden branch, alarms are going to sound all over the place. And probably the QE is going to get some alarms, and he's going to get some alarms, and his managers are going to get some alarms, and they're going to try to figure out whose fault it is. All right? So the good part is that because we're using a repository, something like Git, that's mostly everybody uses Git now, right? Some type of Git. There's GitHub, there's Bitbucket, there's a whole bunch of personally hosted Gits. But the point is there's a repository now. If something like that happens, they can roll back. They can say, uh-oh, and roll back to the previous change. And then the developer will have to fix it, right? Maybe it wasn't a developer's fault at all. Maybe the network went down. Or maybe something happened with the database. Or maybe the application didn't deploy correctly, right? So there's things that can happen. Does that all make sense? Why we do this? Okay, now you guys can ask me questions so that if there's any pieces I missed that still don't make sense to you, I can explain. That all sound good?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So right now the development happens globally, right? Not just one place, not in
Mhm.
US, it happens in different places. So how do we select the time? Like which is the time which is quiet time?
It just depends where you do the most development. Here's something else to realize. I gave you an example with one developer, but there's never one. There's a lot.
Okay.
And so that means that even when that suite gets triggered, it will pull the code up to that point, but it doesn't prevent anybody else from making changes later on. It will actually build multiple copies of your application and deploy in multiple locations. So multiple people can simultaneously have multiple jobs going, and that's perfectly fine. So it's not really, like, it doesn't have to be 9 p.m. Really, you can even do it in the middle of the day. Yeah. Anyways, so if you have multiple developers, however, what happens is, so you have your gold over here, right? That's your remote Git, right? What happens is if you have multiple developers, they all get a copy of the golden branch. They all have a copy. Does that make sense? And when they start making changes to it, right? So this is change A, change B, change C. Sometimes what happens is this guy finishes his change, puts it here. Now this is gold with A, right? And this guy comes along and says, I want to put my changes in, but guess what? He checked out without the change. He checked out regular gold, right? And so now when he tries to push it in, the remote Git will actually prevent him because they will say, I'm sorry, we have some additional stuff. And so then what he has to do is he has to actually pull this down and figure out on his own how to merge, like whose changes go first, his or or these ones, right? Like which one go on top of one another. There's two ways to do it. There's a rebase and a merge. All right? The way rebase works is that let's say that this used to be gold, right? So if you do rebase, it's gonna pull any changes that happened since you pulled, right, gold, and then it will apply yours on top. Even if you pulled 2 weeks ago, and these changes were happened like yesterday and today, it will still put them under you, right? Make sense? And so it will be something like A, and maybe C, and then yours will be on top. That's how it works, right? If you do a rebase, and if you do merge, it works the opposite. If you do a merge, it keeps your changes where they are on your branch, and then it pulls everything else on top. So it's either yours on top or everybody else is on top of yours. Either way, if you and somebody else change the same file, you'll have to manually pick and choose. Go through the code and say, yeah, keep this line, no, let go of this line, so on and so forth. So it's your responsibility, if that kind of conflict occurs, to figure out how to get rid of the conflict. So you should be able to read others' code, not just yours, unfortunately. And sometimes like there's weird situations sometimes when you actually didn't really change anything in the file, but Git gets confused and it thinks like an extra line was added or something, like a little space. So sometimes it will freak you out. It will be like, this file was changed. And you look at it and it'll be like an extra space from you and an extra whole bunch of code from a developer. And with either case, you just have to be like careful and put it back. So it's nice. Questions? No? Okay, good. So does everybody understand now why we automate, why invest the time into it, and why even though it's a pain in the butt, we still want to learn to do it and do it? Most teams are now moving towards a situation where they will move away from manual testing, or they will only manual test right before going to production, and they will not manually test at all during the entire development. Some do it in sprints, some do it in quarter, some development like, I don't know, semi-annual, but they just won't manually test, period. Because everything is just done during using automation. And there's multiple levels, so you'll have your unit tests, you'll have your API tests, you'll have your integration tests, which are essentially API tests, but a little bit higher up. And then you have your regression, WebDriver, UI tests.
Is it integration test?
Yeah, so it's kind of like API, but it might be more of a hooking up to, for example, like a federated identification, where like you can log in through another portal, and then it redirects you to your website, something like that. It's like a third-party software that does authentication for you. Okay. Let me just close some stuff here. 1 second. Да, пожалуйста. Hopefully it will behave today. Спасибо. Turn it on first. No, I left. Still can't get to selenium, right? Still can. Oh well. How's everyone's homework? We're gonna play a game. Who tried to do the homework? Be honest. Who was able to completely finish the homework?
After coming to here, yes. Before that, no.
That's okay, as long as you know you got it done. That's awesome. Okay, that's good. Very good, you guys. I appreciate the trying a lot, so that's good. And if you were able to finish, you know, even more gold stars for you. Let me just pop this thing open 1 second. So I'm just gonna quickly do it with you guys. There's actually 2 ways you could have done it. You could have two ways you could have done it. You could have first created the employee, clicked save. So here, I'll put a breakpoint there. So essentially, you could have gone this far, right? And then clicked save.
Yeah.
So, you know, save. And then at this point, immediately click on job.
Yeah, but
That's one of the ways you could have done it. But if you went further, and if you went all the way through and did like a search and checked that the employee was there, right? There was a second way you could have done it. You could have then clicked on the link, right? Because remember, these ones, right? These ones, right? They're links. You guys see how this is A, right? It's a link. And that could have still taken you back to the same page. And then you could have added the job and did the search again. And then just checked the employment status and job title, right? 2 ways you could have done it. I'm happy with either one. Honestly, don't have an issue with one or the other. So however you wanted to do it, that's perfectly fine. Now, I did set a breakpoint right here, right now, so I'm just going to go immediately from here. So instead of going to the PIM, excuse me. I'm just going to start adding stuff here. So right after this, I basically just need to click on the job title. And, that didn't work. There we go, that's better. So, I thought this had an ID.
Yes, I can find this find element by link test.
Yeah, no, but I thought it had an ID.
No ID for the job.
It didn't have an ID. Oh, I'm sorry, you guys.
No ID.
I checked everything and forgot to check whether the job has an ID.
Eventually, I will have meta spaces there.
Okay, yeah, so I'm sorry, that was my bad. I should have just given that to you. But since some of you already figured it out, that's awesome. You guys are super. But essentially, yes, so you can do driver.findElement. And then one of the other options you have is link text. Because job is a link, you could have totally done that. So you could have just said job and did it by the link text, right? Job. Now, if that, if I do this, something like this again, now I have to point something out to you guys. We are teaching this class in Python only the first time without Selenium ID. So I will, just like my PowerPoint has a little mistake, right, last week, when your homework comes around, I will miss a little thing. So just email me. Email me and be like, what do I do? And then I'll know and I'll add it to the TXT file, okay? And I know there's one person who asked me for help with their homework over the weekend. I'm sorry, my kids were sick, so that's why I didn't get back to you. I will get back to you today after class. I will look at your code and I will get back to you. But I'm really sorry. Usually I try to get back to you immediately. So we're gonna do job. And then of course you need to click it, so don't forget to click. And then after you do it, again here you might need a sleep because you are going to the next page, right? So I always like to leave myself these ones, so in case I forget later. May need sleep. So I'm here on the job. And then over here on the bottom, you needed to click edit. So right click, inspect. And this one does have an ID. It's actually button save, which is a little confusing because this one has exactly the same ID. But nevertheless, that's how they designed it, so it is what it is. But the good news is if you're really lazy, you can actually copy that bit. Yeah.
Can we use by text also over there? By
It's not really a link here. So here it's an input.
oh, okay.
Right? So like this tag actually has to be an A for it to be considered link.
Okay.
Right, so this is not really a link. Okay, so then again you click here. It takes actually a split second to become editable. So I also like to add a little bit of sleep here sometimes. And I'm gonna leave myself to-dos, but if I don't need them, I'll remove them later. Okay, and here's where things got interesting. We did not learn this in class, but that's why I left you with the homework how to do it. Essentially, you just say select, right? You just say select. And then what you need to do is you need to put in parentheses the actual web element. Now, you could have found the web element and then put it into a variable and then put the variable inside here, or you could have done it immediately as one big chunk.
Size
Yes.
is not open for us. The orange term.
So
It's white.
the HRM dash online,
Yeah.
Yes, doesn't work out. Maybe the
let me try through Firefox.
This site cannot be reached.
Oops, sorry. Pressed enter too early. It's working for me, you guys. I am on Wi-Fi for no computers, but it seems to be working.
It doesn't work for me. Not Firefox, not Chrome.
So this is not Selenium minutes, right? You're going to HRM-online, right?
Yes.
Just checking, because the Selenium minutes it still doesn't work.
It doesn't work too.
I don't know what to tell you guys.
Actually, it's taking us to local school. Portno.com 959. It's turning us to locals.school.
Actually, it works in Firefox.
It's not cooperating. Can you just put HTTPS and then ://? Sorry. We tried to do it upside down. Is it working for you? //
It's not HTTPS.
I just want to try to make sure. Okay. Show saved copy. Hold on. Okay. Hold on. We're gonna figure this out. You guys, even in the private window, I'm still able to go there.
You can work, I mean, the Firefox is working.
Maybe try clearing your cache.
Yeah.
So look, I'm opening an incognito window. So an incognito window basically means no cache, no cookies, right? And then when I go to that website, it opens immediately. So try clearing your cache and your cookies.
It is working in the Firefox. I just opened in Firefox and it is working.
Okay. So I think it's the cache and cookies. Just clear cache and cookies. You don't have to clear all of them. So if you just clear the ones for this website, you can keep all your other cache and cookies, because I know how much we like our cache and cookies, okay? So just clear these ones. In case you, I'm actually not sure how to do it on Windows, but in case you're wondering, on Chrome, let's see.
Always shift F5.
You can do show full history, and then you can just search for that website and just delete everything from here, and that will actually clear your cache and cookies as well. I have no idea what I'm doing now. I think I closed too many things, so hold on, let me.
Or you can go to, or you can inspect element and clear the ticket from here.
Okay, so let's pretend this is mine. So I go to job, I go to edit, and then what I want to do is find this guy. So I can right click and say inspect. And this one does have a very nice ID, right? So you didn't have to worry about getting creative. Again, I'm sorry about the whole job link text. I checked everything except that one. Sorry about that. And then this one you just do driver dot find element by ID, just like we did before. You don't have to click it, you don't have to do anything to it, you just pass it into the select, and then make sure you import select, because otherwise, you know, it just yells at you, and it's not very helpful. So you don't want the ticks, you want the Selenium one. There's only 2 options, so that's pretty easy. And then as soon as you do that, if you put a dot, you get all kinds of really fun options, right? So some of the other fun options you get is select by index and select by value. Now, I think to me at least, I usually do select by visible text. Like to me, that one is the most straightforward. But sometimes it might be more useful to select something by value because maybe the text says 30, right? But the value will also say 30 as a number. So it's easier for you to choose it like a number, like maybe you're selecting like a person's age, right? So instead of you generating a random age and then converting it to a string, you can just do by value, and it's the same thing, right? So, and then by index, literally index is just, the first option is 0, the second option is 1, so it's just like a list, right? You just basically, so if you just don't care what to select, if you just want to randomly choose something, you can do, remember random from last week? So you can do a random.rand int, see how many options you have, right? And then it will choose one from 0 to up to that number for you. And so you can just randomly choose something, right? Instead of always like the exactly same one.
Even for the job title, we can do that?
Yeah, you can do by index and then just pick a random index. So every single time it's something new. Sometimes it's...
It doesn't have to be the numbers. For the country, we have such a long line, we can select it that way.
Yeah. As long as, so like for state, right, there's 50 states, like, and if you want to select something, like on the very bottom, it's like, so you can just do it by numbers. The only thing is, if you select randomly by number, then you need to know how to convert that number into an actual text so that you can later verify. But that's actually pretty easy as well. You can select it and then check the text inside that thing. So you can actually check here. So you can say, sorry, where is it? I'm blind today. There, first selected option. All right, so if you select something, right, first you're like, I don't care, randomly select something for me, right? Pick something random for you. But then later you need to assert that it's saved, what you randomly chose, and you don't know what to assert anymore, right? You guys see the problem? So you can randomly choose something by number, and then you can say first selected option, and it will give you back the text that you selected. And you can assert it that way. Does that make sense?
I have a question now.
Yeah.
So in registration, let's say we are selecting the country as California, but we
You
are
mean
not.
state?
Yeah, state, sorry. So in that case, we are not going to see what we have selected because it's going to go only to the database. As a user, I might not be able to see it, right?
No, you still will be able to see it. It's just how you're setting it. So for example, here, let me give you an example. So if we look right here, right, so we have all these options under job title. So this one over here, this one will be 0, this one will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right?
Okay.
So we have a total of how many here? So it will go from 0 to 8, right? There's 9 options, so from 0 to 8. So if I say, pick me a random number between 1 and 9, right? Because that means it's not going to choose 9, right? Between 1 and 9. So it might say 7, right? And so I don't know what 7 is, right? I mean, I can look here, but during the test, I don't know what 7 is. So once it chooses 7 for me, right, which will be QA manager, right? Then I can say, well, what's the first selected option? And it will actually give me the text back, QA manager. And I can save that into a variable, and when I'm down later doing the assert true and checking that the job title is populated, I can confirm that it was QA manager.
Okay,
What
what
is the
if
command?
there is no population happening? Like, not necessarily we see it all the time, right? Let's say, many times when you do the registration, we don't see that things, what is it we have given for registration, right?
Oh, but it's drop
You
down
should
list.
see it.
You should.
It selects it.
Yeah. I will show it to you later.
Okay. But anyways, let's actually do it. We can actually even do it together. What I was talking about, the random one. Let's finish it the regular way first, and then we will do the other one. So select by visible text. Now I did see some of you actually creating a variable with the job title you will choose, and that's actually a really good idea. Except what I like to do is put that in the top of the text, just like we did for employee ID. Because that's kind of when the person is just starting to read your test, they can immediately see what all of the expected values are going to be and where they're coming from. So I would say, for example, something like, something like that, all right? And since I'm here, I might as well do the second one. And I can say expected employment status equals
Just full time.
I want to avoid making a mistake, so let me just right? Sounds good? So now I know for sure what I'm going to select. I'm gonna make sure I paste just to avoid any kind of issues. Okay, so now when I go here on the bottom and I say select job title, right? I will say select by visible text, and here I will put a variable. That makes sense? So I will put expected job title. Sounds good?
Can you back in the top for English providers, because I guess
You don't have to do mine, right? The point is that whatever you're going to be choosing, you're also later on going to be asserting, right? So if you have some kind of value that you are typing in and checking more than once, it's a good idea to make it into a variable, right? If you have the same value you're going to be using twice or more than twice, it's always a good idea to make it into a variable. Does that make sense to everybody? So for example, another one that I might actually, can you guys actually, I'll scroll towards the area, but you guys can point me to it. Can you think of another thing that I might want to put into a variable, or another two things I might want to put into a variable in my homework? So remember our job title, right? QA manager. I'm gonna use right here while I'm selecting it, right? So while I'm selecting it, I'm using it right here. And then later on, I haven't added it that part yet, but later on, I will actually assert that it's saved. You guys agree? So that's twice. So I turned it into a variable, right? Can you think of another value that is not a variable right now, but maybe we probably should make it a variable
First and last
that
name?
we're using twice?
First, last
Yes.
name.
Did you guys hear that? So look, 1, 2. I have the same string twice. That means it's a good candidate to make it into a variable, especially because I'm doing an assert on it. Right? Sounds good?
And we also want to put it on top.
Well, you don't have to, right? That's something I like to do. I like to have all of my expecteds at the very top of the test, so I know what's happening. But you don't have to. If you want to just put them all over the place, that's fine. I don't know, something I like to do. You don't have to copy me at all. Okay, let's keep going. So, we chose our job title. We don't have to do any kind of click. We don't have to do any kind of send keys. Just doing select by visible text is good enough. Right? We selected it. And then we're going to do exactly the same thing right here. But instead of job title, we're going to do it for job employment status, right? This guy. And here we're going to put what?
Another variable.
Expected employment status, right? Okay, what's the last step? Well, in this here, there's also assertions, but those are not steps. Those are, verifications. So what's the last step?
Save.
Yeah, save. And it just so happens that the save button has again the same ID as the edit button. So, haha,
It's okay.
copy and paste. Now, this last part, I already told you what, in the homework, I told you what the locators are going to be, right? So I'm not going to show you, I'm just going to add them. But essentially, it's just going to be job title and employment status. Oops. What happened? And then instead of TD3, it's going to be TD5 and TD6. Right? So far, so good? So does this all make sense? This is like, it was in the homework. Except for the job link, which I totally messed up on. Everything else, I don't think is new. It's what we did in class, right? Or I literally told you what code you need to put in. So you should have been okay with that. Sounds good?
What about assert equal? Can we use
Yep,
this
we're
one?
gonna add those. So I'm just gonna do this twice. And then what goes in the expected for job title? What goes here?
Variable.
Which one?
QA manager.
Which one? So we're comparing job title against
Expected to.
expected job title. By the way, you see how I'm almost calling my variables identical names? That way I'm not like, what did I call that thing? No, Job title, expected job title. And if you want to be more verbose, you can say actual job title, expected job title. Then you're completely not confused. You know where this one came from, you know where that one came from. This is expected, this is what you chose at the beginning of the test, this is actual, this is what your WebDriver returned to you for checking. Make sense? So, same thing here. I'm gonna put expected employment status and employment status. Oakley dokley. Now, just because I'm on a roll, I am going to take care of this James and Bond situation right here. I'm gonna go over the way on top and I'm gonna add two more. I'm gonna say expected first name, expected last name, and this is gonna be James and Bond. Alright? So here, expected first name, expected last name. Yeah? We talked about it, so it's not new. And then of course, if you're gonna change it on the bottom,
Is it always better to give the underlines or camel case? What do you think is the best?
in Python, underscores tend to be the trend. In Java, camel case tends to be the trend.
Okay.
But to be honest, both languages are allowing both, so. For example, I'm doing double quotes here, but I know if I go to my work, they actually have a policy when they only use single quotes. There's no particular reason, alright? Python is fine with single quotes and double quotes, but that's what they decided. They want to use single quotes only, so.
Sorry, if you use single quotes and if you use something like apostrophe, it doesn't work.
You have to escape it. So you just basically use, is it slash or backslash? And you can escape the single quote. So you can, it's still doable. So for example, you can do, the same thing with double quotes, right? Oops, sorry. So for example, if I wanted to put an actual literal double quote, I could escape it and it has no problem. You see? So same with single quotes. It actually really doesn't matter.
Isn't it bad stuff to not to introduce the variables over there, that first name, last name, and to put all this stuff like driver.find by xpath inside of the assert equals? Is it like bad stuff to do?
No. If you are comfortable combining everything into one, that's perfectly fine.
I am comfortable, but
Then good, go for it. Now, the one reason why people sometimes like to have them separately is, if you guys, do you guys see how it says first, second, and then it says MSG equals none? So it's possible in Python to leave a message in case there's a failure. So for example, if my first name that I got back from the browser does not match my expected first name, this message will trigger and it actually can give you additional information. So sometimes people like to have the values they got back separately so they can put them into a more verbose message. They can be like, on this page, I expected to see the following but got the something else. That make sense?
yeah, but we can also put the driver.find by xpath on the second place, right? Then comma and the message.
But then when you leave yourself a message, you will have to get it again. Because in the message, you also want to include that value. Here, I'll give you an example. I'll give an example. So,
Actually, I got it.
well, it's okay. I might as well do it anyway. So, I'll actually, last week did not explain format to you. You cited my PowerPoint and I said I'm going to do it. Let's do it right now, right? Good time as any, right? Let's learn about format. So sometimes what you want to do is you want to write a sentence, but replace some of the values in that sentence later on with variables, right? There's two ways you can do it. You can put a little bit of a sentence and then plus variable, plus a little bit of a sentence, plus variable, right? But that gets really hard and messy after a while. In Python, there's a format command which lets you deal with the situation a lot easier. So for example, right now the message I want to leave myself is expected the table to contain first name block, right? For example. But instead, the value was some other block, right? Make sense? So what you can do is you can put a set of curly brackets. This is what I call curly brackets, right? They're kind of like this, right? And you put a number in there, 0. So it's an index. It goes 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then over here, I put another set of curly brackets, and I put a 1, right? So what do you think I eventually want to put where 0 currently is? What do you think I want to put in there? Expected the table to contain first name.
Expected first name.
So which variable do you think I want to replace for 0?
Expected first name, right?
You guys hear that?
Yes.
Right? And what do you think I want to put in the 1 place?
Expected last name.
No.
No, not expected last name.
First the value was?
The actual one, right? The actual one. So what I can do is right after I write my message, I can do, I can do this. I can say message dot format, right? Like this. And then in parentheses, I can list out in the same order. So the variable that needs to go into 0 is going to go first. The variable that needs to go into 1 needs to go second. So in the same order, I will list the variables and it will do substitutions for me later on. That makes sense? So for example, 0 has to be expected first name. Oops, expected first name. And then 1 is going to be actual first name. Make sense? So now in order to actually show you how this works, I'm going to break my code so you guys can see the message. Okay? Okay, and this is how I'm going to break my code. Okay? I'll put it back into a variable later. So far so good? Let's do this? Okay. So I'm actually going to set a breakpoint over here. And run it. Okay, so I'm going to go through it very slowly, clicking on job title, clicking on the edit button, selecting QA manager, right? That worked, right? Selecting full time, that worked. Clicking save, that worked. Clicking npim, doing the search. There we go. Now, I want you to take a very close look at James Bond. Does that look correct to you? That look correct? James Bond, right? And so that matches my expected values, right? James Bond, that matches exactly. So if I was to use my eyes, I would be like, yep, they're the same. You guys agree? And this is where things get a little bit weird and why automation is sometimes a good thing. All right, so here we have our first name, our job title, our employment. We got all the values. If we look on the right side, can you guys see it? James Bond, QA manager, full time. Actually, it might have not worked. I think it cut off my space. I might have to do it twice, you guys. Sorry about that. Oh, it still didn't break. Okay, hold on, let me break it a different way. It didn't break the way I wanted. Okay, hold on. I won't do the debug anymore. I'll do it the actual fast way, but... Why didn't it work?
Yeah.
Oh,
I hope everything is very fast, otherwise I don't know where I'm gonna.
Oh, they fixed that little issue they had.
Leading spaces.
Yeah, it used to save the spaces, which would give me, what I wanted.
Instead the value was 1.
But now it doesn't do that, which is not what I want. I wanted not to have. I wanted to have spaces. Wait, did it break? Oh, it broke. Okay, it broke. Okay, no, it broke. Did it break? It didn't break.
No.
Damn it. Yeah. Okay, I'll just explain. I can't break it apparently. So the UI got fixed. Used to be if you put a trailing space, it would save it with a trailing space, and then your assertions wouldn't work. The reason it wouldn't work is because James with a space does not equal James without a space. That makes sense? But the weird part is when your assertion comes up and it says broken, it doesn't show you single quotes around it. So you don't see this space. You see what I mean? So it basically says James does not equal James, and you stare at it for like half an hour and you go, why does James not equal James? I don't get it. And so what I like to do is, that's why you saw me do this. You saw me do single quotes and then curly bracket, right? Because that will show me the spaces. So if I have the single quotes, I'll see that there is space here, and I'll see that there is a space, no space there. Does that make sense? That's why I do this weird. But I can't show it because they fixed it, and so they're now trimming all the spaces. Darn it. Which is fine. It is what it is.
Can you explain that formatting one more time?
Which formatting? Oh yes, so we're gonna talk about that right now. So, but you guys kind of saw how it worked, right? Let me completely break it so we can see the message, because I was trying to be smart, but so I'll let it break. We can talk. So here's how it works. Just let it break. You don't have to watch it. It will break this time. And if it doesn't break this time, then Phi unit is broken, so it's all its fault. Okay, so here's how it works. The format function, right, belongs to the string object. So anytime you have either a string of some kind or a variable that contains a string, for example, x equals hello, right? You can say x.format. That make sense? Okay, so far so good?
Mm-hmm.
So you can do double quotes .format or x.format. Doesn't matter. Works either way. But here's how it works. Inside your double quotes, what you need to have is at least one set of these. Okay? At least one. Okay? There are two things, see how I drew them empty? There are two things you can put inside those curly brackets. You can put numbers, which are indexes, so they have to start with 0. Or you can put actual words. You can do that as well.
3.
Remember dictionaries from last week? Remember dictionaries? So if you put words inside here, they become keys. That make sense? If you put numbers inside here, they become indexes. So list, dictionary. So far so good? Let's talk about indexes first. If I want to just do indexes, I have to be very careful about the order of my variables. So for example, if I have multiple here, variables like this, right? Hello? Huh? No, this is a sentence. This is just a sentence. You don't have to worry about it. So if I'm doing this way, I can actually put 0 and 1, right? Or I can put 1 and 0. or I can put 0 and 0. I just can't put 1 and 1 because you have to start with 0. So you can have 2 zeros. You can do 0, 1. You can do 1 and 0, but you have to have at least 1 0 in there. Does that make sense? But the order doesn't matter. What matters is the order in which you put the variables into the format function, not the order in which you put them inside the actual string. Right? Make sense? So let's start from the simplest scenario. Simplest one. 0, 1. Right? So what I want to write is I want to say, hello, no, we need 2 words.
Mr. Jones.
Mr. Jones. All right? Hello, Mr. Jones. So when I do x.format, what do I put first? Mr. And what do I put second? Jones. So far, so good. What if I do this? What will my sentence become?
Mr.
Hello, Mr. Mister.
Button.
Oh, what if I do this? Hello, Jones, Mister.
Where?
Weird, but you know, you guys get the point. So if you want to do this, then just reverse them, right? Put Jones and Mister in reverse. Ah, my writing is getting worse and worse. Alright, so that will actually still be Mr. Jones if you do it this way. If you put 1, 0, but then you still put them in the correct order, right? So Mr. and Jones, that still works. Perfectly good. Yes?
Those squiggly brackets, they add the space in between each word, or do you have to?
No, there's actually a space here. There's actually a space here.
So just the actual space adds the space, not the
Yeah, the actual space. They don't do anything. They literally get extracted the way they are. Okay?
Placeholders.
Now here we put words. What if I did this? This is very bad self-documenting code. Not self-documenting code. Don't do this. Alright? This is just for fun. I feel like I've overused bond already, so. Alright. So if I want to put hello, Miss Smith, or Ms. Smith, how would I put that? X dot format. This is weird, right? Because they're backwards. Keep that in mind. I'm making it more difficult for you. Alright? Format, and then what do you do?
It is
A,
comma, Y.
Y. Guys get it? So I didn't make it completely difficult. They're at least in alphabetical order. Okay? Sounds good? Okay, so you understand indexes, right? Indexes are easy. And to be honest, most people will use indexes. Alright? But you can actually also use keys. Hello, hi planet. Right? Hi planet. And so what I can do here then, I can't just put, can't do that. Because now there's no index. So it's not like it goes in. Now the format function will actually look for the key value pair. So you actually have to specify which key to go into. That make sense? If you're using indexes, it's pretty simple. If it's first, it's 0. If it's second, it's 1, so on and so forth. But with keys, you need to specify which key the value belongs to. So the proper way would be to say, I'm sorry. Let's do it. Okay? Make sense? And that will be hi.
Mars.
Okay?
No.
Okay then. My fingers are all black now. Alright, so to be honest, I very rarely use key values for format. I usually just stick with like, 0, 1, 2, 3. Unless I'm writing some kind of very complicated message which contains like 7 or 8 different variable substitutions, right? Where I can just like get like, oh my god, I'm confused which in which order. Or maybe sometimes where I have to use the same variable 2 or 3 times in the same message. Does that make sense?
So can we assign the same name for the variables in one test? Like you have given message equal to one sentence, right? For all the 4 assertions, can I give message equal to and give that?
Yeah.
So there won't be an issue.
Nope.
How will it know which message I'm calling?
It's just a variable, right? How will it know which
If you show
variables to substitute inside your message?
Yeah.
Okay, it's the format function. So basically the same thing I did here, right? I called x twice. I have x written once, right? But here I said that format James Mr. and here I said x.format AY. So every time you call format, whatever you put in, that's going to get substituted. But you can reuse the same string over and over. You see what she's asking you guys? She's saying that in my test, oops, let me scroll. She's saying in my test, I did this message right here, right? And then I used it here. Well, her question is, can I continue using it here, here, and here? And the answer is?
Yes.
Yes. I would just need to substitute different values inside my format. So here I would say message.format expected last name, right? Regular last name, expected job title, so on and so forth. I can keep doing that. Now the question is, do I really need to in this specific situation? Probably not, because even if this fails without the message, it will still give me both values to see. It's only when you have something a little more complex, like 2 sentences that are large, or something with spaces that's really weird, that this might be helpful. But most of the time, just a regular assert true or assert equals will give you enough information if it fails for you to be like, oh, they are different. So here is what it looks like when it fails. Oops, sorry, I thought I was going to maximize it, but it didn't. Okay, so you guys can see the message. So this is what you will usually get right here without the message. You know what I mean? Because we left ourselves a message, this is what you see first. This is the additional bit we got because we left ourselves that little message. That makes sense? But even without it, I'm pretty sure you guys would have figured out the issue, right? Now, if this wasn't an S, if this was a space, then you probably would have scratched your head for a while, right? And said, they're the same. Because you wouldn't be able to see the trailing space. So in that case, this would be helpful because you have single quotes around it. You would be able to see that single space. Does that make sense? Instead of the S. I was trying to demo that, but that totally backfired on me. So, use your imagination.
Did you concatenate the last one to fail it?
No, I literally just broke it, like here.
Okay.
I broke it. I'm gonna put it back right now. I don't want it to be broken. This was strictly to show how it works. Now, you guys, I did leave myself a lot of to-dos, but the connection with this HRM online is really quick. I actually like to test with my own HRM, like my Selenium minutes HRM, because it's a lot slower connection. So you're forced to do all those sleeps. So I'm really hoping by next week we'll have it fixed so we can go there. It's going to be more difficult, but then also it's going to be more resilient. So it's going to be less likely to fail once you debugged it perfectly, right? But I'll be honest with you, there should be a sleep here, 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 and
It's already
here.
there.
Alright? They should be. The fact that it's working without sleep is weird. It should be broken. But it works. Okay, that was your homework. I don't think it was hard. So if you haven't done it, go home and try it now that you've seen the solution, right? Yeah. Let's see.
Do you want to finish? Yeah. I'm not putting it everywhere, just one sheet. Yeah. I just have to corner, so I decided to put it in the you can put in it.
Sorry guys, let me go get some water. I'm kind of beginning to get a little. I'll be back.
One second.
Я смотрю как раз. Да, вот прям на дорогу.
Okay, I did not see
Да, увидишь, там прям земля крепче. Там дорого, там
Там дорого, потому что это острова, все надо завозить и самолетами. Самолетами и кораблями. За тройной ценой.
I forgot to turn off the lights today. Sorry about that. Okay, let's do the locators, right? That's what's on the menu today, so let's do that. Okay, because we all know that my PowerPoint is not cooperating, we're gonna do it this way. So, huh?
Did you try this time?
It always cuts off the left, so we can try it. I honestly don't mind, but
If I try to copy, I can give you the flash.
no, it's my laptop. It's like a bug with my laptop. It works on other people's laptops, but
work from that PC from the class, from the desktop.
it's not working. See? I don't know why it does that. Whatever. So we'll just do it this way. Oh, it's back. Good. So, by this point, you're familiar with all the find element by and find elements by. What you might have not noticed is that there's actually also two additional functions called find element and find elements that actually don't have a by. These are going to become more important to you once you start creating your own steps and functions. Why? Because in Webdriver, you're able to use multiple different ways of locating an element. Later on, when you start thinking more about making your code maintainable, right, easier to maintain, you might want to store locators that you use inside your test with your test. or even more specifically, with your test steps, all right? Does it make sense what I'm saying? Kind of ish? No? Okay, so right now, when we are writing a test, right? Everything that we do until we assert is a test step. So far, so good?
Yeah.
And right now, our test steps live inside the test, right?
Yes.
But actually, if we have time today, later on today, most likely next week though, we're gonna start thinking about how we can reuse some of these steps between tests. For example, the biggest candidate is login. You wrote already several tests, and inside each one of those, what was the first thing you did? Login. So would it be nice if instead of writing 3, 4 lines of code, you could just say login and be done,
Yeah.
right? Well, that means that function has to live somewhere else, not inside your single test file, right? Because if multiple test files want to access it, it should be somewhere that's kind of like the middle ground for everybody. And because you're using some locators in that step, the login step, or you will be using them, it's probably also a good idea to store those locators, not as hard-coded values, not as a txt username, txt password, but as variables, all right? Why would you want to do that? Well, if at a later point they decide to rename those IDs from txt username to input username or just username, right? It will be a lot easier to find it if it's a variable rather than if it's hard-coded all over the place inside the login or any other place you might have it. That make sense? Unfortunately, over time, you're going to build up a large list of these locators, all right? And not all of them are going to be IDs. We already learned that not always tags have IDs, right? We learned that. Sometimes they have names, sometimes they have plain text, sometimes they have classes, sometimes they, so we're going to learn all of that today. There's other options up there. But if you end up using a different locator that's not ID, you also need to somehow note in your code that, hey, this locator is an ID, this locator is a class, this locator is a linked text, right? So that the person later on trying to use it, they know, like, how do I use it, right? And the easiest way to do that is to store the locator type, which is ID, name, class, and the locator together. That make sense? I'll show you later. But if you store them together, you won't be able to use these functions, right? You'll have to use this one instead. And then supply the type and the actual locator here. That doesn't make any sense right now. Don't worry about it. Just be aware that it exists. Next week when we start talking, not next week, Thursday, Monday, yeah, maybe next week, like Thursday-ish. When we start talking about page object model, it will make more sense, right? For now, just remember that there's another method that doesn't have a by, right? Sorry. Okay. So let's keep going. In WebDriver, there are two main locator strategies. Now you're looking up there and it says CSS selector and XPath, and you're like, we've been using ID this whole time, it's not up there, right? Is that what you're thinking? Well, that's because ID actually falls under CSS selector, right? When you say driver.find element by ID and you pass in that string in double quotes, what happens behind the scenes is that actually calls CSS selector. That's what it does. Right under the scenes it says, oh, you passed this thing in, okay, let me pass it over to CSS selector, find element by CSS selector. And the only thing it does is it puts one of these in front of what you passed in. Okay, so it prepends a hash sign in front, and it says, ta-da, CSS selector. So ID falls under CSS selector. Some other things that fall under CSS selector is by class name. By class name falls under CSS selector. Now, by linked text, the one that we used to click on job title today, that one actually falls under XPath. Funny enough, all right? So overall, all these options on the bottom, ID, class name, name, tag name, link text, partial link text, they actually all fall under one of those two. So under the hood, all of these on the bottom will call one of those two on the top. Make sense?
Does it matter which goes where?
Yeah,
Does it matter which goes which what? You said all those, one of this will go under that.
You don't have to do it. It knows what to call. So that's already pre-built inside. But it's always good to be aware of how the code you're writing works under the hood. It's just, it's kind of a good practice to understand how things work.
What is false under Express?
Huh?
What is false under Express?
Link text,
And that's all?
link text, partial link text, that's it. Tag name, name, class name, and ID fall under CSS.
Cool.
Yeah, okay, moving on. So let's talk about how things are going to work from now on. If you are looking inside the inspector, right click inspector, and you see a tag, and inside it you have an attribute called ID, chances are you want to use it. Now you see how I'm saying chances are? I'm not saying always use it. Do you know why I'm not saying that? Because sometimes those IDs are dynamically assigned, which basically means every time you refresh the page, a different one is going to get displayed. All right? The easiest way to tell is if it's gibberish, like GH2960BG, maybe you don't want to use that. There's a very big chance it's dynamically allocated. Now, sometimes, like for example, Google or Facebook, they like to mess with you, even though they're not dynamically created, those IDs, even though they're actually like, that's how actually somebody wrote them. That's the value they gave. So every time you go to that page, you will see that ID with that weird thing in the middle. So sometimes gibberish doesn't mean it's dynamic, right? But most of the time, if you see something that is English, like first name, last name, so security number, account number, if it's a nice word, you want to use it, all right? That's the rule of thumb. So if you go and you look at the tag and there is an attribute called ID and next to it there's something that is English-like, you absolutely have to use it, all right? Now if you look at it and it's something weird, gibberish looking, then use your best judgment, all right? Maybe refresh the page a few times, go to a different browser, see if it changes. If it doesn't change, try, right? But gibberish is a little bit icky. You never know. You really never know. Okay, so far so good. Now, why do you want to always use ID if there is an ID? Just like in a database where you have primary keys, IDs are primary keys for your website or your web page, all right? So when your web page loads, your browser actually indexes all of your IDs. So as soon as you tell to the browser, find me this thing by ID, it goes bam, it found it immediately, all right? When you use XPath or any of the other CSS options, it actually has to look, all right? Actually, we'll start from the top and go down and be like, no, keep going. No, still going. Make sense?
Mhm.
So IDs, good. Now, the added benefit is also what I mentioned at the beginning of the class, right? Even if you have some kind of volatile UI, like maybe the developers and the UI designers are still not sure where that button is supposed to go and which color it's supposed to be, or what the text of the button is going to be. Submit, enter, go, right? Log in, they don't know. If they keep the ID the same, they can change it to their heart's content. Your script will still work. That make sense? Mm-hmm. So ID is good. Okay. After IDs, the next one in order of preference is, well, actually name and class. So if your variable has a name, it's still pretty good. But if it has a class, that's pretty good too. Classes are CSS selectors, and CSS is marginally faster than XPath, all right? So if you have to choose between XPath and CSS, and both can accomplish the same purpose, go with CSS. In most browsers, it is marginally faster. Right? But when you have 1,000 UI tests, that marginally becomes a good, 6, 10, 15 minutes saved, which is, Yeah, it's good. Always good to have a little bit faster code. And I'll show you how to find things by class later. Now I say marginally. The only browser that it actually makes the huge difference on is IE. So if you're automating for Internet Explorer, stay away from XPath, like the plague. All right? It's literally like 5 or 6 times slower than the XPath is. Again, not a big deal. It's like 20 milliseconds or 100 milliseconds. It's still fast, but you know, it's significantly magnitude up. Now, the last one here is if an element must be located by its text node. Now, text node is actually a JavaScript speak, right? So like if you know JavaScript, you would know what a text node is. But essentially, by the thing you see between the curly brackets inside HTML, not, let's look at the HTML first. I don't mean between opening and closing, right? That's not what I mean. I mean between closing and opening. So this right here, this is text node, all right? That's what it is. It's an anonymous tag. It's a tag without the actual, all right? So it's called a text node. So if you actually want to find, for example, this option by its text value, right? Then you actually have no other choice but to use XPath. Now this might become outdated in about a year or two. Why? Because technically CSS3, the newer CSS, supports searching by text. You can actually put a text and put a value in there to find it. It's just Selenium 3 doesn't support it. That makes sense? Selenium 3 is still using CSS2, so it doesn't support searching by text using CSS. But they are evolving, so maybe they will implement CSS3 support soonish, and it might be able to find things by text. In which case, you'll be always able to use CSS, right? But right now, if you want to find something by text value, you have to use XPath. That's the only rule. For everything else, you can pretty much get away with CSS. Sounds good? So let's learn some CSS first, because you know, if in doubt, try CSS. That's how it works. So, let me zoom this a little. Can you guys kind of see that? Yeah, sort of ish. So we have a form that has an ID, login form. We have 4 inputs. And these inputs don't really have IDs, right? Don't have IDs. They have class, name, and type attributes. So far so good? And value attributes. All right? So form has an ID, inputs do not have IDs. So we cannot use ID to find one of these inputs. We can't use the ID to find the form. Okay. So we'll start from actually the middle one. We'll start from the middle one. If you see a tag that has an ID and you are using CSS for whatever reason, right? So first of all, if you have a tag and you're actually looking for that specific tag, so that's the one you want to click. That's the one you want to send keys to, all right? Then you would just say find element by ID. So far so good? But if you actually have, let's say, let's do a picture. I'll draw on this board this time. Let's say that you have 2 forms. You have one form and a second form. And both of them have an input. All right? And both of these inputs have exactly the same class name. So input, class, red. And this one is also input, class, red. If you say driver, find element by CSS selector, right? And you try to use class to do it, it will find the first one, which is that one. But you want to click this one. What do you do? Now you have a problem. But if this form has an ID first, and this one has an ID second, so far you're with me?
Yes.
You can build a longer locator which incorporates the ID. So what you would say is you would say CSS selector. I'm not going to write out selector, so just CSS, right? Shorthand. You would say hash, include the ID of the form. Second. So far so good? And then you have some options over here. You can either put a space or more than sign. We'll get back to that. Okay? And then you will use your class name to find the actual input. That makes sense? So that's in order to get to the correct one. So instead of just saying, I want to go to the red one. Well, oops, wrong one. You will say, no, the second form, red one. Make sense? So if you have an ID and you want to incorporate it, hash. Now, notice how it says, notice how it says here, to locate by CSS ID attribute, append the ID name, which is what we did, right? Second, to the parent tag name. You see that?
Yeah.
Where's my tag? Oops. I didn't put my tag. In CSS, the tag name is actually optional, especially if it's an ID, because it's unique, right? So if it's unique, that means the tag name is really irrelevant. You guys see what I mean? If it's in a link or an input or a form, it's still the only one. It's not like, I can have this ID in a link and a form, but not, twice in the form. No, it's unique. So tag name isn't really that important. You can leave it off. Make sense? So it's optional here. Now, if you're one of those people who's like, it just makes me feel uncomfortable. I don't feel comfortable. That's fine. You can put form in front of here. You can put form. It will work the same. It won't change anything. There's something biting me, sorry. Okay, I'm probably crazy. It's like I'm like, okay, do you see what I mean? So you can either say form hash second, or you can just say hash second. Perfectly fine. Now, let's go back to the first one, right? We have this red class. Class equals red, right? So I didn't finish my locator here. I said you have an option and then, right? So let's finish it together. When I see a class and it has a value I want to use, all I have to do is put one of these in front. Just like for IDs, I put a hash sign. For class, I put a period. So how would this look? If I want to go here, how would this look? Form pound second and then tag name. Tag name. Tag name. Input. Dot red. No double quotes, no single quotes, no slashes. That's it. Alright?
I have a question. Why do we need to specify the class if we have already used ID, which is second?
Because we're trying to go here, not here.
Okay.
Right. So we want to send text into the input, not into the whole form, right? Besides, this form might have other inputs inside. So, make sense? Oh, by the way, I lied again. This input is also optional. All right? The thing you have to keep in mind though is that you have some links with the class red, and you have some cells with the class red, and you have some, something else's with the class red. It will find all of them and then try to narrow down by the form. All right? So if it's not an ID you're using, it's a better idea to still include the tag name, unless that tag name is the only one on that whole page with that class. That makes sense? Mm-hmm. So if you're looking on the whole page and that's the only one that has class equals red, everything else is purple and green and white and Josh and tree and banana, right? This is the only one that has class equals red, then leave the tag off, because It's the only one. But if you're using class and there's other tags that have it, put the tag. It just makes it a lot faster for it to find it, right? The more information you give, the better. Yeah.
Is there anything after the second? You have put hashtag there. CSS equal to hashtag second, and you're just leaving a space,
Yeah, just a space.
and you put that.
Just a space. Now, I usually draw one of these, but that confuses people. So you guys, from now on, every time I draw one of these, like, I don't know,
Smile.
upside down rainbows or smiles, it means a space. That's how I show you that it's a space.
So-
Yes. Okay, okay.
This is it like instead of ID we are using it?
Yeah,
I mean ID or it's a locator basically.
All of these are going to be locators.
No,
Yes.
just one. So
specific,
why is
which
it
one?
on, why is it on variable? Why is it on CSS?
So I'm just saying we're creating CSS selectors right now, right? So we have two types, right? We have XPath and CSS.
Okay.
So right now we're creating CSS
Okay,
selectors.
so we don't. Okay, got it. So you're
I just
not-
didn't want to type out CSS selector,
we
so I
are
just
not
wrote
assigning
CSS.
it. Okay.
I'm lazy. Cool?
Yeah.
Okay. You guys, I honestly need a break, and I think you do too. So let's come back and finish this afterwards. 9:05. And I'm really sorry, but I won't be answering questions during this break. I just need to breathe, okay? So I'm really sorry. You do need to know the documentation. So you need to know what kind of data you need to pass in if it's a post, what kind of headers you need to pass in, what kind of cookies you need to have. So you do need all those docs.
Yeah.
But otherwise,
We have the swagger, so we have all that information over there.
the thing is, in my experience, I've never seen docs that were up to date, ever. I worked at a lot of companies, and I've never seen them up to date. So most of the time, I will still kind of either go look at their code, or talk to somebody, or stumble around, or sometimes even use curl and just experiment, because docs are always outdated. So just kind of beware. You might stumble into a can of worms you're not ready for.
What docs are you talking about?
Just documentation, just like for API. For API, like for example, they say like to create a user, this is the API you need to call. This is what you need to pass in. But then like they forgot that there's an additional parameter they added, or they forgot that now there's a new header that needs to
Are
be
you
passed.
talking about a well-known company, or are you talking about a company we're
All the
working for?
companies.
I'm talking in general. Most companies have docs that are outdated.
Hold on.
Most. It's just
The startup
very rare if they're up to
doesn't
date.
have any document.
Okay, you guys, let's keep going. So, if I want to use class and I'm using CSS locators, what do I do? What do I put in front of the class?
Dot.
Dot, right? If I want to use an ID and I'm using CSS locators, what do I put in front of the value for the ID? Hash. Good, perfect. Now, what if I have an attribute that is neither class nor ID? Well, then there's only one other option, and that is a set of square brackets. Okay? So that's where we get to third bullet point, right over here. So for example, this one has class, this one has class, this one has ID, but this one, third input and fourth input, they didn't have class or ID. So my options are name, type, and value. It doesn't matter which one I choose to use. I can choose to use name, I can choose to use type, I can choose to use value. I can combine two. I can use all three. Doesn't matter. In any case, I would have to, in square brackets, put the attribute name and the value, both of them. Does that make sense?
And nothing before.
That's again becomes an optional situation. But I think when you're using square brackets, same rule as with dot class applies. Does that make sense? So you can leave the tag off. It's optional in CSS. You can leave it off, but it's better to have it because it makes your locator a little bit faster. Basically, your CSS locator is a query. That's what it is. I'm not using it as simile, right? It is. Your CSS selector is a query that your JavaScript is going to use to find your tag in the document. That makes sense? So the more specific you make the query, the faster it will find. That makes sense? So if you make it specific, it will pull less information. If you make it loosey-goosey, it will put more information and it will have to do a lot more processing. Make sense? So, if I want to find the fourth tag and I want to use its value attribute, what would that look like? Talk me through it. First thing I'm going to put is what? The tag name, which is Now, I want to use the value attribute. So what do I put?
Dot clear.
No, not dot. It's not a class. Not hash. Yes. Square brackets right next to the input. No space. There's no space here. You see how there's no smiley? No space. Right next to input, you put a square bracket, and then you literally copy the entire thing exactly how it looks. So you're gonna put value equals clear. Hopefully.
And what?
All right. What if I want to find the third input, but I don't want to use value? I want to use either name or type.
Same input square bracket.
You don't want to use name, right?
Well, that's the next question. Is there anything wrong with me using name?
Yeah, because it will pick the first one.
Two
It will pick the first
continuous.
one, but it is the first one. So technically,
Okay.
I can still use it, right? Do you see that? There's two of them with the name equals continue. But it's the first one. I said the third input is the one I want. So perfectly fine.
But I don't want to use it.
That's fine. Don't use it. So what do you want to use?
Type.
Type, all right. Type equals.
Submit.
Submit.
Does it have to be double quotes, you guys?
No.
Nope.
Single.
It can be single quotes.
Oh, so
All right. What if we have a situation where we have to use two attributes? Because maybe there's another one that also has type submit. Like maybe this one has not password but type submit in there. Maybe, right? This one is type submit, this one's submit. This one's continue, this one continue. So we want to make it unique. So we want to include both. And what do we do?
Just another
Open another square bracket.
Yup. We just put a second set. Do we have that example here?
Just
No, we don't. Oh, anyways, we should. You just put a second square, and then you put your, value equals enter. I'm running out of space, but you guys get it, right? Okay, so that's all nice and good. Pretty groovy, right? Last thing to cover, and this is the bottom example that we're going to be looking at.
it's no common in the thing.
You see how this one has input class equals required, and then there's a space pass field?
Oh yeah.
Well, the biggest mistake that gets made is people think class required pass field is one value, like required pass field. In fact, in CSS, that space is a comma. So that tag has two classes assigned to it. The first one is required, and the second one is pass field. That make sense? So that means you can find that second input either by saying dot pass field. Can you use dot required there to find it?
Yeah.
Try again. Can you use it?
No, it will pick
Because
the
if you
first
say
one.
dot required, it's going to be the first one. We want the second one. So you can either say class dot pass field, that's valid, even though you're not saying both. Or you can actually say both, but then you have to use two dots. You will say dot required dot pass field. You will chain them just like on the bottom. You guys see it? So I'm not gonna write it on the board because it's already in the bubble, okay? So again, because it's pretty unique, there's no other input here that has required and pass field as a class. You can leave off the input tag. That makes sense? So you can just say CSS equals dot required dot pass field and leave off the input. So again, in CSS, not in XPath, in CSS, the actual tag name is optional. You have to use your best judgment whether to leave it or not to include it. That make sense? Okay? If your class, attribute, ID is unique enough, leave it out. If it's not, just put it in there, you know, for safety's sake. Okay, does CSS make sense to everybody? It's pretty easy, right? Okay. Oh, last one. Let's talk about this space over here. Okay. So in CSS, remember I said you have an option, but that I kind of glossed over. You have two options. You can either put a space, or you can put a more than sign. Now here's the difference. If you put a more than sign, the relationship of this tag to this tag has to be parent-child. That means one has to be immediately under the other one. Okay? If you put a space, it means it can also be a grandchild, a great-great-great-grandchild. So basically, let's say that you have a table, right? And under table, what do you usually have? You have T-body, and then TR, and then TD, and then maybe somewhere inside you have an A, right? Like a link, right? Well, you can actually put the table ID and then immediately the link. As long as you put a space in there, it will still find it. So it's relative. But if you put a more than sign, it better be immediately after that tag. So it actually has to be table, and then the next tag has to be A. Make sense? Yeah? Okay. Let's keep going. Are you guys super excited? You're like, woo-hoo-hoo! Actually, that's already here. So if you get confused, it is part of the PowerPoint. So for example, form, and then input is a direct child. Okay, does that make sense? Now, input is not immediately under the form, but it's a child of the form. Does that make sense? Like, this is me essentially. I am form, and those are my 4 children, right? I don't discriminate. They're all my children. So you can say more than, and then point to any one of those inputs. Okay? But if for example, inside this input, there was another one, like an A, like a link inside there, you wouldn't be able to use a more than sign to go to it. You would have to use a space. Okay? Okay, I think we covered everything here. Okay, the excitement that is XPath. So, anything you can write in CSS can also be expressed in XPath. XPath is slightly more versatile than CSS. Okay, I think you guys got that. One of the biggest versatilities of XPath over CSS is being able to locate by text. But also it's much easier to note down which child. So if you specifically want the 3rd input or the 4th input, you can actually say 3, 4. In CSS, it's not quite as easy. You can still do it. You can still say nth child, but it doesn't quite work the same way as it does in XPath. So let me explain. Can I erase that board? Let me explain. Let's say we have a table. So first, okay? Table? Okay. Under a table, we can have T-head, T-body, right? Okay. And then let me make this a little clearer. T-head, T-r. Okay. So if I was using CSS to go here, or if I was using CSS to go here, it would be no benefit to use CSS or XPath. But what if I wanted to go here? Notice that this TR doesn't have a class or a value or an ID or anything. But I need to get to the 3rd TR, right? In CSS, let's put something else here. Let's put a div inside here. Right? In CSS, I have to count children. So div is a child. It's a different child than all the rest. That's a child. And then you have 3 more children. So how many children does T body have? So if I wanted to go to the third TR, I would have to check all the children that T body has and count all of them. So this one would be n child 4. Make sense? Even though it's the third TR, it would still be nth child 4. And let's pretend that now there's a diff between every single row. They are all children.
Children or for the T-body is gonna be grandchildren.
Huh?
For T-body, it's gonna be grandchildren, no?
No, they're all children of T-body.
Ah.
They're all on the same level. See, I lined them up, all on the
Okay.
same level. So now if I want to go to the third TR, which child is it? 6. Which to me doesn't seem intuitive, right? So third TR, why is it 6? And if somebody removes one of the divs, now it's 5th, right? And you can't even tell which child it is by looking at it. Like you're looking at the UI, you're like, 3rd row, right? In XPath, all you have to say is, ta-da, right? You see 3 rows, it's the 3rd row. You don't have to look at the HTML and try to figure out how many children it has, other than those TRs. 3rd TR, 3rd TR. You can put as many divs in between, and anything you want in between. You don't want to put a div here, put a link, okay, whatever, nobody cares. It's still the 3rd TR, right? So, XPath locators which begin with // are relative. You already knew that. I told you that last week, right? Nothing new. However, if you use developer tools and you copy XPath, chances are it will copy an absolute path for you. So you will be able to tell that it's absolute because it will start with 1/. Think of it like Unix, all right? In Unix, the first slash, if you see the first slash, it means an absolute path, right? But in Unix, it's like no slashes means relative. Here, 2 slashes means relative. So 2 slashes. And most of the time, people write 2 slashes all the time. I've never seen anybody use a single slash, ever, ever. And I'll explain to you later on why that's the case. We're gonna do a little game. But let's figure this thing out first. So, there's really no special differentiation in XPath between IDs, classes, values, types, any other attributes, right? In XPath, basically, if there's an attribute, no matter what it is, you will put an @ sign in front of it. So in that case, it's actually quite much easier than CSS, right? CSS, you have to remember a dot, a hash, a square bracket. In XPath, it's always square brackets @ always. So for example, I want to use XPath to find this first form, // form, not optional, you have to have it, // form, and then what? Square bracket. @ID equals login form. Does that make sense? You have to. You have no choice. You want to include 2? That's fine. You actually have 2 ways to do it. Just like CSS, you can say square brackets @ the first attribute equals its value, closing, opening the second attribute, or you can open one set of square brackets and put an end in between. Like literally, you will put name equals password and AND space type equals password, closing square brackets. You can do that as well. You can even combine numbers and attributes. So for example, you have input that has continue and input that has continue, right? So you can actually say input square brackets @name equals continue, right? And then you can put a square bracket and put 2. Does that make sense? Why am I saying 2?
The second one.
Right. It's no longer a 4th child. You're basically saying you found 2, I want the second one. Make sense? That's why you wouldn't put 4, because there's only 2 like that. Not difficult, right? Now, just like in CSS, you can string them together, right? So you can find the form first, for example, the ID, right? And then you put another slash, and you go down more, and now you can look for the input. So if you have a situation like this, right? You can do it with XPath as well. Where's my marker? So the same locator that we wrote here in XPath would look like this. / form, square bracket at ID equals second. Right? So far so good? We're doing the same thing. Right? And then slash oh, I'm sorry, not input. I'm like copying it, so sorry. Make sense? Now, even if you're looking with your eyes, you can see why people might prefer CSS, right? It's a little more concise. But when it comes to situations where you can put a number of things, like 3 or 4, it's so much easier than CSS. So people will use XPath, even though it might be a little longer, it's easier in the long run because of the numbers. Okay? So that's all nice and good, but remember we talked about the space versus the more than sign? So this is exactly the same as this. 1 slash means immediately under. More than sign means immediately under, right? If you wanted to do the same equivalent as a space in CSS and XPath, what would you need to do? So this is relative to that. This means relative. So you can do a relative with two relatives. Okay? If you think about it, it actually makes sense, right? I mean, kind of. So space equals double slashes, more than sign equals single slash. So you can do relative XPath inside a relative XPath to cut out pieces. So instead of having something this long, you can remove the middle part. Now, why would you want to remove the middle part? You guys want to play a game?
Because if something happens in between,
Something happens in the middle to break it, right?
you will break it.
All right. You ready to play the game? We have HTML Town. HTML Town! Yay! And inside HTML Town, there's a title right here. We don't care about that. We have the neighborhood of T-body. No, I'm sorry, the neighborhood of body. Right? Body neighborhood. And inside the body neighborhood, we have all kinds of houses. We have 2-story houses and 1-story houses with multiple units. And then we have these tall multi-unit houses. So far, so good? All right. We'll start simple. My friend lives here. What, by the way, what is this called? So this is a table, right? Remember houses? I mean, use your imagination, right? This is a table. What is this thing? TR. And then the actual unit that he lives in. What's the apartment at HTML land? TD, right? So he lives in an apartment, right? Okay. So my friend lives here. And this is me. I need more hair.
There you go, so beautiful.
You should see the first picture my daughter drew of me. The dad got legs and hands and everything. I just had hair, like all over, like an octopus. I was just like an octopus of hair. She figured, who needs hands? It's all good.
Okay, I'm jealous.
Anyways, so this is me. I'm trying to go to my friend's house, right? Using XPath. How would I get to my friend's house?
HTML.
So if I was to start immediately from HTML, I would do absolute path, right? So slash HTML slash body slash table
for TD. Then
Slash
for
TR.
TR
slash tr
slash TD.
slash td. Okay, so far so good.
TD0
But do I really need to do it this long?
No.
Can I just go to the first house that's inside the body neighborhood? Just like get into the body neighborhood, first house you see, you go in. Can I do that?
Yeah.
So what you're saying is I can do this, right? And I still won't get lost? There's no houses in here, so I don't have to worry about it. Right? So as long as I make it to HTML land, if I find a house, I can walk into it. The first one I find, and I'm there, right?
Did you do the after table double slash and go TD?
We'll come back to that, yes. So okay, I'm gonna follow your rules, right? So far so good. I'm gonna get in here, I'm gonna say, ooh, a table. And then you guys told me TR, right?
I have the question.
Yes,
Your friendly means in second tier or?
We're- you're ahead of me.
No,
No, you're ahead of me. So I'm gonna go over here, I'm gonna say, ooh, a TR. And then there's gonna be a person here like this.
Oh. She's not as good.
You gotta let me have my fun. What happened? You guys sent me to the wrong address. Alright, so how do we fix it?
TD2. What?
Try the next one.
square bracket 2.
TD2.
I mean, second floor, no? Or...
So I walk into my TR and then I jump off the building and I go splat!
Okay, so
How do I fix it?
TR2, TD2.
no, TR.
TR2. So you guys made a noob mistake. You went to HTML Town and you thought in HTML Town floors count from the bottom. No. In HTML Town, the first floor is actually the top floor. Counts from the top down. Okay? So the penthouse is always floor number 1. It's for everybody who's number 1. Get it? The penthouse? Okay. So my friend is not that cool. He doesn't live on a penthouse. Alright? He's broke. So he lives on the bottom. Alright, no penthouse for him. So this is how I fix it. Alright? Now here's the question, the next question I have for you. Can I do this?
Yeah.
I think yeah, because
Right? So I'm gonna go here, I'm gonna see the first something I find with a second floor, right? Or rather, a second floor from the bottom. I can walk into it and I'm fine. Right? You guys agree?
Mhm.
So far so good. That's good. Okay. Okay, let's make it more interesting.
More complicated.
My friend, just like me, decided to move. He got a raise.
wow.
Right? My friend got a raise. So he got himself a new haircut. And he moved into the penthouse suite. I don't know why he's sitting with his legs out on the balcony, but
But
whatever.
he's happy.
He's doing it. He's happy. He's not jumping. You see, he's smiling. So don't worry. All right. So now what's his address? Can I still go to TR2TD to get to his house? No, he
No.
moved. So let's go again. Now this time, try not to give me the whole path. Try to give me the smallest path to his home. What's the smallest one you can do?
Table.
So this is a table, this is a table, and this is a table, right?
So table 3.
All right. So we're gonna go table 3.
PR
And just
slash
TR.
TR.
Why do we need TR?
And TD2.
TD2.
No, double slash TD2.
TD 2.
Yes, very good. All right, but that works. Shall we check?
Yeah.
1, 2, 3. Woo! TR. Woo! TD2. Okay, we made it. Yay! All right. But then,
We push him down.
not yet. We're not gonna push anybody out.
Suicide.
But then, here's what happened.
Oh, there is a new table now. So that will not work.
Bro,
It broke.
so what do you need to do?
No, we cannot change that then.
To update it, right? And developer was like, no, sorry, I made a mistake.
He's sad.
Using the ID or?
There's no ID.
Those are square, just use your imagination.
Tier 2, TD5.
Still TD2, right?
Okay, why are we playing this game?
Why?
Any change to a long X path will break it. Right? Can you think of a way to make this X path a little more resilient to change? Right. Adding some kind of attribute. Doesn't even have to be IDs. Just attributes, right? So for example, let's say that this entire house is blue. Right? And this one might not be blue. This one might be gray, and this one might be yellow. How could you incorporate that? Right, so instead of putting 3, right, tying it to a number, you can tie it to an attribute. So I'm sorry, you guys, I'm gonna just do this, and then I'm gonna do that, okay? Because that's, I don't wanna keep erasing, my fingers are already black. So we're gonna say color, right?
Yeah.
Equals blue. That goes in square brackets like this, but you also need an at because it's not CSS. You guys agree? Okay? So now what happens if I do this? Still works?
Yes.
Okay, still works. That's good. What happens if I do this? Well, it broke, but he's happy again. That's a bigger smile than before. So, is there anything else I can do? How can I make this more resilient to change?
TR1.
How likely is it that a table might get rows added? Pretty likely, right?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. So my other thing would be, well, how can I get rid of this TR completely? What would have to happen for this TR to be completely gone and this thing to still work, right? Regardless of who adds the row. So 2 rows added, rows get deleted, doesn't matter. What would I need to do in order to not need this TR in there at all? So basically to do this. What would need to happen?
Assign ID to each data.
Okay, that's not very realistic though, to add an ID to every single cell in a table, right? It's realistic technically, but that would be dynamic and that would defeat the whole purpose, right? So, but how can I differentiate it differently, my cell?
Give both the height and the position of this one.
Yeah, so it's not even the height and the thing. You can add any kind of other attribute. So that's why sometimes cells in the table that have first name will have class equals first name. All right? Or in our case, maybe our little friend decided to get some curtains. All right? Just his cell is going to be curtains equals green. So if I have something like this, and I change this to at curtains equals green. Now, no matter how many rows get added or how many apartments get built in front of him, right? Or how many houses, or whatever happens, it still works, right?
So we are not looking for TD anymore.
We are.
We are looking for TD, not TR.
Well, technically, you make a good point. Do we need to look for TD? What are we really looking for? For green curtains,
Yeah,
right?
blue curtains. Oh, green
Green
curtains. Okay.
So as long as nobody else in the neighborhood gets green curtains, we don't even need to have the table.
Oh my God.
This
This is perfectly fine. Walk into the neighborhood and be like, green curtains.
There you go.
So it's gonna look at the every each.
So that takes longer time, right?
What?
Because it will go first building, second building, third building, and then go.
What we'll do is we'll find all the TDs, and then it will try to find the one that has an attribute curtains in it, and then it will try to find the one that has green in it. So if we have only one house with curtains, we technically, you guys, are you hearing this? If we only have one apartment with curtains in the entire neighborhood, we technically don't even need this part.
Oh, it is optional there. Okay, we just can add.
Yes. Are you now totally confused?
But you have to first, anyway, check all this TD,
I'm
right?
gonna cry.
Don't cry. So if you only have one TD in the whole document that has an attribute curtains, not a very common attribute, that one, curtains, you don't see it in HTML a lot, all right? Then you don't even need to specify its value. Now, if you have another person being like, I'm so jealous, I need to get curtains too, right? Then you do need to have the value,
Equal to
all right? Now, assuming they're gonna get curtains that are not green. If they all get green curtains, then we're screwed.
How do you know what is one attribute we have? Because then we need to go through all the codes.
Yeah,
or-
they are like this.
You need to look at your tag.
No.
Every tag?
Every tag. It's gonna search till this
Excellent
point.
question.
You can search.
Super question. So she's asking, well, how do you know it's the only one? How do you know it's unique, right? You're not gonna go up and down scrolling on this HTML page.
She had this question from the beginning of the class. So
Sorry. That's a super awesome question. So, it used to be, back in the old day, you had this search field right here. Now they make it more difficult, so you actually have to open your HTML and do Control F. Alright? And then look what you have! You can put either your string search, CSS selector, or XPath. Alright? And it will try to find it for you. So if you're looking for something unique, for example, something that looks like this. Alright, that's pretty unique. You can actually say / select square brackets. Oh, by the way, you know how I said select and it said 1 of 6 over here? So immediately that tells me, not a very unique way to find things. Right? So I can make it more unique. I can put something like this, and I can put @name. And it says 6. Okay, not a very good unique way to find it. So I can say equals, and it says 1. Pretty unique way to find it. Now, if I use something else that is not quite as unique, let's do something like value equals
It's like a search.
1. No.
select.
Yes, you're right.
Targeted.
Right? If I do something like option value equals 1, yeah, it's a little bit more unique, right? It's like if I just do option without any kind of thing in there, I get 39, right? If I just do option. If I add something like @value, again, not unique. But if I say equals 1, That's better than 39, 1 out of 4. So I narrowed it down. But is it unique?
No.
Is it? No. It's not perfectly unique. You have other ones that are throughout the HTML. You can actually click on these things up and down. You guys see that? Woohoo! And try them out. Okay?
Can I?
Yeah.
The question is, if we choose a TD with the curtains like equal green, so what it's that the program is gonna do, like go through all of them till this one, right?
The same thing that when I do just add value, it goes and it finds
Okay.
all the options that have a value.
Okay. From
For
the
example,
first
what
one
if I
to
do
the-
this? What if I say selected? Because that's an attribute. It's a weird one though. Look, it's an attribute that has the same value. So selected. So as you can see, if I do option add selected, I'm not putting the value. Okay? It still narrows it down to 6.
Can you do one from the beginning? Any one from the beginning? Clear.
Sure.
enough?
Pick
Clear.
one. Here.
Anything is fine.
Which
Clear.
one?
Anything is fine.
Date.
Okay, date picker.
Date this one?
Okay.
Okay, let me do it from scratch. Actually,
No.
okay, let's do it this way. It's faster. Inspect.
Control
Okay, let me look at it first so I can find. So it's
So it has ID. You don't need to.
By the name, maybe?
We can
so there's actually several dates, so we can use the class.
Okay.
So let's do it this way. I'm gonna say I am looking for an input. All right?
Yeah.
And it says I have 29. And I'm gonna say, well, I am looking for an input with the class dot.
Okay, you're doing CSS.
Ooh, why did it do that? Sorry, it did something weird for me. I didn't copy, but it copied for me. One sec. That's the one I wanted. Dot input from date input from date input. Right? Enter. Now that narrowed it down, right? Now I have 4. Okay, and then I want to narrow it down to, I don't know. What do I want to narrow it down to, guys?
Name.
This one's bad because they're all duplicated. But I might do something like this. I might say with an ID, even though this is totally stupid, but with an ID, job, join. Alright, now there's one.
Oh. So it doesn't matter.
So by the way, before I used XPath, now I use CSS this time around. So can I rewrite this as XPath? Let's do it. Let's do it from the beginning. So
Input ID.
Could you?
we'll come back to it. It's okay.
Input.
Don't cry yet. I'll show you a shortcut, okay?
//
So // again, I'm looking for any input first, right? Input. Oops, 26 of them. All right, not unique. What's the next thing? I want to use class. This is CSS now, not, I'm sorry, this is XPath now, not CSS. So what do I do for XPath? Square brackets, and I want to use class. So add class equals why doesn't that work? Worked for CSS.
You?
I remember it working for CSS. Do you remember working from CSS?
Did you put the different code?
Let's try it again. Let's try it
Why
again.
we cannot do it? with
So when I
ID?
did this for CSS, it works.
Right, because
When I do this for XPath, doesn't work.
What? Great.
All right, that's something I haven't mentioned yet. But while in CSS you can use classes out of the list interchangeably, in XPath you have to put the whole thing. Like the whole shebang, enchilada. Make sense? But there's a solution.
What is inside of the class? All stuff. Solution.
There's a solution. We're gonna come back to that in a second. Okay? All right. I completely lost track of what we were doing. Somebody asked me to find the date, and now I don't remember what we did before.
Just you would like to
Yeah.
put all the stuff inside.
What if developer will lately add a couple of more green curtains, for instance? And before that, I would have a habit to create the shortest path and read the others. So by doing this,
He has an awesome question. So remember our green curtains? And we chose the shortest path? And then developer went and added green curtains all over the place because he has a thing for green curtains? Well, I have one answer for all of you. You cannot rely on your any locator to last you forever. You should immediately get into the mindset that they will be broken all the time and you will be maintaining them all the time. Now, here's the best case scenario. Base case scenario is your developers will be awesome, and when they change something, remember when they change something, it runs your code and it breaks your tests and they can't merge their stuff? They will also be smart enough to go and fix your test
Why would they
with
do
a
that?
better locator.
What?
Now that's if they're awesome. If they're not awesome, this is what they're gonna do.
What?
Your test broke. Fix it.
Oh, what about please?
It's your fault. All right. So both situations are true. Sometimes the developers will be like, "Your test is bad. It broke. Everything in the UI still works. Your test is bad." And I'm like, "No, you changed stuff." But most of the time these days, developers are pretty awesome. So when one of the tests breaks, they'll just go and fix the locator. Developers know locators, so they can fix it. And if they really, because you created a locator that is like this, and they can't figure it out, they'll usually like slack you and they'll be like, need some help here. Don't know what's going on. Okay? So don't worry, your locators will break no matter what. So do what's comfortable. If you feel that it's unlikely to have green curtains in the near future all over the place, use it. If you feel that it's likely you're gonna get more, don't use it. Make it a little more unique.
You would like to put their own
What?
class. You would like to put their own class here.
Yeah, that's okay. We're gonna come back to that. I'm too lazy to type it out. Well, okay, fine. I'll do it. Fine. She's making you work, you guys. Let's all look at her and make her feel bad. Okay, so see, that works. You guys see that? So in XPath, the whole shebang needs to go in there.
But it's not good, right?
That's fine. I mean, it looks ugly, but it's fine. All right, let's go back to our PowerPoint, because if Ellie deviates from the PowerPoint, she'll forget certain things. So, remember what the main reason for us using XPath is? Well, besides those numbers, right? 3, 5. It's also because we're able to match by text, right? So here we come to our solution for the previous problem, which is you have to put all the class inside. And another solution. Well, what if you want to look for something by text, like oranges, for example, in this case? Okay? So XPath also comes with a whole bunch of functions, right? Now CSS3 also has them, but they're not supported in Webdriver yet. They keep promising it. It will happen. Don't know when. So for now, XPath is your friend. Now these things are not the only ones. I'm giving you the basics. So if you're very interested in XPath, go and read about predicates, go and read about functions, go and read about, all the XPath awesomeness. But to get a job and do your work, 99% of the time, this is enough, all right? So one of the functions is called text. And text is a getter, just like driver find element .text, that gives you back text. In XPath, if you say text, it will give you the text back from the tag it finds. Does that make sense? So if you want to locate by text, you have to say what the expected value is. And I know that in code we're usually used to having 2 equal signs, but in XPath we use 1. So you kind of have to wrap your head back to, this is not assignment anymore, this is equivalent. So here we are looking for a label whose text, the full text, is oranges. Now if you have a label that has oranges and bananas, this won't work. The full text has to be oranges. If there's more stuff on the end or in front, doesn't work. If you want to do partial text, you have to combine text with contains. For example, maybe I want to look for ran. The word ran. I'm looking for a label with the word ran inside. Right? What I can do is I can say label contains, right? Text, but I'm no longer going to say equals. It doesn't equal that anymore. It contains comma. Now text is an input to the contains function. That make sense? So contains is going to get the whole text, just like this thing gave us the whole text. But now contains is going to make a judgment. Does this thing exist somewhere in here? And here I would put ran, right? So if I hit contains text ran, it will give me back oranges. That make sense? Contains doesn't have to be used with text. Contains can also be used with class. So far, so good? Mm-hmm. So if we go back to our problem over here, where I have to put this entire enchilada, I can simplify this by using contains to only include 1 or 2 of those values. So let's do that. I actually want to only include this part. Okay? How can I make this work? What do I need to put inside instead of class equals to get this to work?
Contains.
Class contains.
So input that contains, right? Just like a sentence. Input that contains
Class.
Text.
a class,
Ah.
right? A class. You still put add class just like before. Add class,
Not equal to,
comma,
comma.
and the text. See?
But it is 1 out of 4.
Yeah, because it contains this. It doesn't have to have the whole thing. Okay? So if I say add class equals, it's the same as me saying text equals. It has to equal the whole thing.
So,
But if you want a sub piece, you say this contains, and then the first one is the full value. So you can either put text in there, or add class, or add value, or add tag, whatever that thing is that contains the whole value. And then the sub string goes in the second parameter. Does that make sense to everybody?
yeah. So in this case, it will not pick just that one, right? Because we have 4.
It will pick the first one.
It will pick the first one. So in case if it's the second one, we will have to still give the path to it.
And now we get to the awesome question that you just asked. So what if I want the second one, not the first one?
Just
I already gave you the answer today. Come on.
Open another square bracket.
yeah.
You're too smart now.
Wait, why doesn't that work?
Round bracket. You have to.
Oh, that's right. Okay, sorry, you have to do this.
Yeah.
There, I forgot about the round parentheses.
Fine.
I always forget, but then I go, why doesn't it work? Oh yeah. So you're basically saying, find me all of the occurrences, and then make it the second one. Make sense?
Yes.
It's you're using parentheses just like in multiplication or like division. You're basically saying, do this first,
And it goes for the.
and then do this part. Otherwise, it gets what's wires crossed. Okay?
I think it's a long day today. I work every day except Tuesdays. It's too much on the week. I think I'm not.
Okay. If you want to learn more,
Yeah.
W3 schools or W3.org, honestly, they're awesome. You should just go there just for fun.
This is the best, right?
That's where I always go. It has more information than I need, so maybe there's something better, but honestly, why?
It's like it's tutorial or it's just documentation?
No, just documentation.
What about tutorial?
Ooh, I don't know. The wrong person to ask. I've been doing this for a while, so I don't know. Probably some awesome stuff out there. Anything I would know has been dead for a while, so you don't want to ask me. Okay, you guys, so here's the thing. That's all exciting, I know. You guys are like, woohoo! But here's the good part. Anytime you find any kind of weird locator, like let's say, for example, this LI right here, right? This label doesn't really have an ID, doesn't really have anything, right? What you can do, and I really wish you wouldn't, I'm going to show this to you, but I honestly think you should all learn to create these things manually, just like I've been sitting and writing them out. And I'll tell you why as well. It's the easiest question to ask during the interview. I can show you any snippet of HTML and say, create me a locator for that. And all you're going to have is a whiteboard or a piece of paper. You're not going to have this thing where you can right click. So during the interview, I'm going to do this to you 100% of the time. And okay, not everybody's as evil as me, right? But a good percent is. So they're going to be like, here's some HTML that I printed out on a piece of paper. Find me a locator for this. And you're going to have to write it. So you should get in the habit of just writing these. Okay? But on that note, you can right click and say copy. And over here you have XPath. And guess what this one is? Yeah. So let's play around with this. I'll pop up a text. Mate. Does that look like CSS? Yeah. Yes, it does, Ellie. That looks exactly like CSS. And if I right click on this and say copy XPath,
Okay.
okay? Now, they actually did something funky here. You see that?
So that how?
It's the same thing. Because the ID is unique, what they're saying is, I don't really care what the tag is. Any tag with this ID. I'm not a big fan of doing this. This is more of a show-off as far as I'm concerned. But, you know, if you want to do it, you can. With IDs, because they're unique. You don't really need that tag, because there's only one with that ID. Okay? So technically, if you're ever in doubt and you're like, this doesn't have ID or class, and I have no idea what to do, you can right click and copy XPath or CSS. Now you guys, what it gives you here is not always the best one, I'll be honest. Sometimes it will give you something this long, and if I manually write it, I can make it this short. Okay? Or it will be this long and will also break all the time. And I can make it this short and won't ever break. So learn to do it manually. Learn to think about what you're doing. Okay, so let's see, what else can we do today? Usually we do a little bit of an exercise. You guys know we want to go home.
I do the homework.
I'm almost tempted, but I also want you to practice. I'm almost like, I'm so tired, but at the same time, I feel like it's my responsibility to make you suffer.
Let's suffer at home.
You want to suffer at home?
Yeah, we suffer at home.
He said we need to sleep on this.
Thank you.
All right, fine.
It's just,
Just this once.
yeah.
But remember, I was gonna make you practice for 20 minutes. You guys decided that you wanna go home, right?
Yeah.
All right, so here's what we're gonna do. Two things you need to be aware of. This is actually day 4. We only have 3 folders up so far, and we're still covering curriculum under folder 2. That make sense? So what I'm gonna do today is I'm gonna move all the curriculum to actually correspond to the day under which it was taught. I was a little reluctant to do it last week because I didn't announce it to everybody. So when you look back tomorrow, it will actually resemble what we covered. So like today's day will only have locators under day 4, all right? Previous day will have PyCharm debugging, navigation, and it will have Python basics or something we had, right? So it will actually, so don't freak out if curriculum all of a sudden goes and moves. All right, everybody understands? That's number 1. Number 2, that means the folder number 4 is gonna appear because today is day 4. And under it, there will be a homework assignment. And that homework assignment will not just use IDs. It will use an XPath and CSS. It will be a very exciting time for everybody. Okay? It might even use loops.
Loops?
Maybe.
Uh-oh.
All right? So it might even use loops. We'll see. We'll see how difficult I make it. I'll still have to come up with something to make it difficult. Okay. So check back. I will be honest with you. I'm probably not going to post it tonight or tomorrow. It's not going to happen. So check tomorrow evening. All right? Then I'll post it by tomorrow evening. I'll post it. Yes. Yes. And that leads me to my second part of this. We will have folder 4. And under folder 4, there will be an in-class folder. And inside there will be
Homework folder.
a zip of my
This one.
project, which will contain a solution to your homework from today. That makes sense? So if you check today after class, you will have day 4, Python day 4. Under it, you will have an in-class folder and a zip of my project.